an avenue that was created to house an elite of coffee planters, that saw mansions being built and later housed the country's first skyscrapers, and that today pulses as the financial and cultural center of our metropolis. I was going to say that Paulista is the heart of São Paulo, but São Paulo is so big that it has several hearts. Avenida Paulista is one of them. More than just a street, it's the very image of urban transformation and the history of Brazil. And then we ask ourselves what could be sacred in all this coming and going, and today I want to invite you. Let's discover the spiritual side of this unique avenue. Avenida Paulista. It's a dream to be here. I've dreamed of visiting this place since childhood. I never thought I'd end up living in São Paulo. It's one of the faces of Brazil. Now, do you think it started out like this? In 1891, there was practically nothing here. And then came a Uruguayan, a certain Joaquim Eugenio de Lima, who had a dream. Let's build a big avenue right here. A big boulevard like the ones that had appeared in Paris. It was the time of Haussmann, the famous architect who destroyed everything in Paris. He built those streets the way we know them today, very wide. Paulista Avenue is a mirror of Paris. But it's also a mirror of Brazil. It's our identity. And it all started back then with that Uruguayan. So did he make it? At the end of the 19th century, São Paulo was still a growing village. But Eugenio de Lima saw the potential of the Paulista Ridge, this area where I am, which is the highest in the city, and he thought big. He wanted a wide avenue, a boulevard like those in Paris, surrounded by mansions and gardens to attract the coffee barons who dreamed of the glamorous life of the French capital. Paulista Avenue is the beating heart of São Paulo. Skyscrapers, hurried people, heavy traffic. And in the midst of all this, it's impossible not to notice this very different building right here next to me. An imposing entrance, giant columns. I'm not referring to this building, but to the church that looks like it came from ancient Greece. Just look at these two columns at the entrance of St. Aloysius Gonzaga Church here on Paulista Avenue. St. Aloysius Gonzaga Church is a landmark from the era of grand mansions when Paulista Avenue was home to the barons. Built in 1935 right here at the intersection of Paulista and Bela Sintra, the church occupies a space that for over a century has been a spiritual refuge. Back when it was just a chapel of the old St. Louis Jesuit school which recently moved and modernized. The church, as its name suggests, was dedicated to St. Louis Gonzaga, who is not the French St. Louis, not King Louis IX of France, but rather an Italian Louis, who was born very wealthy, decided to give up everything to dedicate himself to the poor and the sick. And he ended up dying precisely because of that. Because during the bubonic plague, he didn't want to stop working, ended up contracting the disease, and died very young. Let's go inside to see the Church of St. Louis Gonzaga on Paulista Avenue. There are pink granite columns that are 11 meters tall. The capitals up there are made of bronze and weigh 3 tons. Greek inspiration from the Erechtheian Temple, dedicated to the goddess Athena, a classical touch in the postmodernism of Paulista. I've already said this, but I want to emphasize, St. Louis Gonzaga has nothing to do with King Louis IX of France, who was a king during the time of the Crusades. In fact, he led a crusade and took the crown of thorns from Jerusalem to France. We've already shown this in a special about St. Louis, actually. But not this one. This is an Italian St. Louis, who was born rich like the other, but this one decided he wanted to be poor, that he wanted to live like the poor and with the poor. And that's his story, which we're going to start telling in more detail from now on as we enter the church. I never imagined I would come here right in the middle of São Paulo with Paulista Avenue right in front of me and find such a beautiful, sumptuous place dedicated to reflection, dedicated to prayer. And he's a saint with a very interesting story that I'm going to tell you about in a little while.
The church was built to serve the school. It was the church of Colegio San Luis. The Jesuits arrived here around 1914, coming from Itu. The school is from the 19th century in Itu. They built the school in Itu because they thought it was the city that wanted to develop the most in the state of São Paulo. It was that time of the Republican movement, the fall of the empire, so there was a lot of activity concentrated in Itu. There's the Itu Convention, which I don't know if you've heard of the Itu Convention. It was a group very connected to Freemasonry who were organizing the proclamation of the Republic. There was also coffee, so it was believed that Itu would be the great city of the state of São Paulo. As the coffee cycle changed, São Paulo started to grow, and they realized they had to move here. The church was then inaugurated in 1935, serving only Colegio São Luis. Later, it developed its own life and was elevated to a parish, then connected to the Archdiocese of São Paulo in 1966.
The all-bronze tabernacle is a masterpiece. With its golden interior and decorations that resemble a miniature Roman temple, it impresses with its beauty and precision. In the stained glass windows, we see the tribute to saints of the Society of Jesus. There are also beautiful depictions of scenes dedicated to Jesus. I write you this letter, my dear mother, with the hope that you find comfort and strength in the Lord. The time has come for me to say goodbye to this world and enter into eternal rest. Do not cry for me, but if you have any love for me, leave the world as I did and come to heaven so we may rejoice together in the presence of God. Leave the world, Mom, and come to heaven. This is the last letter from St. Aloysius Gonzaga to his mother, and it shows his detachment, the dedication he had, his vocation, and his faith. It's important to remember that at a very young age, in the last moments of his life, St. Aloysius Gonzaga dedicated himself to consoling his mother in the face of his own impending death. It's a moving scene to imagine. The son who knows he is going to die dedicates his last moments not to suffering because he is leaving this world, but to consoling the mother who will be left alone. São Luís Gonzaga nasceu em 9 de março de 1568 no castelo de Castiglione, na Itália. Era o primogênito de uma família nobre. Renunciou ao título e à herança para seguir sua vocação religiosa. A infância de São Luís Gonzaga foi marcada por disciplina espiritual. Aos 7 anos já se dedicava a orações e fazia jejuns. Aos 9, uma experiência em Florença reforçou seu desejo de dedicar a vida à religião. The decision to join the Society of Jesus did not please his family at all, but he ended up receiving strong support. It was St. Charles Borromeo who recognized the young man's calling and made sure he moved forward. As a Jesuit novice, he embraced poverty and deepened his spiritual dedication. During the plague that struck Rome in 1591, Luis Gonzaga volunteered to serve the sick, even knowing he could die. He cared for people, carried the infected in his arms, and comforted those who had already lost hope. He contracted bubonic plague, resisted for a few weeks, but ended up dying in June 1591 when he was only 23 years old. This brief journey was enough for that poor Jesuit Luis to be recognized for his holiness. And then he was beatified and canonized according to the Vatican's rules. He was declared the patron saint of youth by the Catholic Church. He left a legacy that continues to be remembered for his dedication to charity and spiritual life. His final letter remains a symbol of the dedication to the values he sought to practice throughout his life. And then suddenly we stop in the middle of Paulista Avenue in front of a hospital that was founded before all of this became what it is today. Then you ask yourself, why did Rodrigo stop in front of the hospital? I'll explain in a moment, but first I'm going to tell the story of this hospital, which is very interesting in relation to what Paulista Avenue is today. Hospital Santa Catarina was founded in 1906. At first, this wasn't the luxurious building we see today, and Paulista Avenue was different too. We're talking about a time when there were mansions here, none of these tall buildings like today. There wasn't all this asphalt, there were lots of gardens, and the hospital started out very modest, very simple, built with donations that came from Germany. And to build this hospital in the beginning, it was thanks to the efforts of the Sisters of St. Catherine. It was the idea of Sister Beata Heinrich, who moved to São Paulo with a clear mission to create a hospital to serve the community. And the gardens here really catch our attention. It's as if the past has withstood the test of time. While most of the buildings on Paulista Avenue rise up on pure concrete, Hospital Santa Catarina has a huge green space. It's so nice to be in here. There are almost 200 different types of trees. It's interesting to think that some of them, maybe many, were planted by the sisters who came here at the beginning of the last century to found the congregation. That seed really took root, didn't it? Continues to this day. And the hospital is still there, much bigger and even more important than it ever was. Right now, if I told you I was on Paulista Avenue, would you believe me? It's right here next to me. I'm inside the garden, which belongs to the hospital and the chapel of the Sisters of St. Catherine. And right here where I am, there's a grotto dedicated to Our Lady of Lourdes. It's amazing, isn't it, to think that it's possible to stop here on Paulista Avenue, go back in time, meditate, reflect, pray. People come here to spend a few moments in reflection, especially as a constant reminder that we're right next to a hospital and that this whole space is dedicated to people's recovery. That makes it even more important to have this little piece of paradise right next to Paulista Avenue. But the truth is, what brought us here was this chapel, the Chapel of St. Catherine of Alexandria. It's been here since 1920 and has a history as fascinating as the avenue itself. But after all, who was St. Catherine of Alexandria? St. Catherine was born in the 4th century in Alexandria, Egypt. She was the daughter of a local king and known for her intelligence and beauty. Tradition says that she converted to Christianity after a vision and began to defend the faith with fervor. During the persecution of Christians led by Emperor Maximinus Daia, she was imprisoned and challenged to deny her faith. Tradition says that the emperor even gathered more than 50 scholars from Alexandria to confront the wisdom of the young Catherine. Catherine, however, not only defeated the scholars with her arguments, but also converted them to Christianity. Is it fact or just tradition? Anyway, the story goes that Maximino became frustrated and ordered St. Catherine to be tortured on a wheel with blades. And we're told that the instrument miraculously broke apart and St. Catherine survived that torture. But not for long. The cruel emperor then decided to behead the young Christian woman. And this time, nothing stopped him. After that, Christians are said to have taken her body to Mount Sinai, the same place where Moses received divine revelation and received the 10 Commandments from God, where monks built a monastery that still preserves the relics of St. Catherine to this day. So well hidden in the middle of the city that we have no idea what's there until we get to the entrance of the chapel and see this beautiful image. Can you hear the music? They're rehearsing a reenactment of St. Catherine's martyrdom. Inside the chapel, we get a completely different impression than we did outside. We can't see Avenida Paulista anymore. We really enter the universe of St. Catherine. First, the image on the altar has a very important symbolism because St. Catherine is always depicted with a wheel, some kind of wheel symbolizing the instrument of torture that the Romans used when they tried to kill her. And tradition tells us that it was miraculously destroyed. In here, it's a small chapel, right? But you can feel all the effort it took for the Sisters of St. Catherine back then to get donations to build this chapel at a time when there was almost nothing here. And we feel close to all of this, a reality created by the nuns and by the saint they've been bringing and carrying with them all this time.
No início, as irmãs da Alemanha, que vieram da Alemanha, they started teaching in their own house, which was here on Brigadeiro. They lived around there and attended o Mosteiro de São Bento. E lá conheceram o Dom Abade, Miguel Cruz, e o Dom, and asked her, why don't you start doing something here in healthcare? But it's going to be very difficult because you need money. Para terreno, como que vai ser isso, como que é esse hospital, que elas vieram numa cultura muito diferente da... To start something new here in that regard.
Deve ter sido muito difícil.
Difícil. So what did they have to do? Write letters, send them to Germany. And this money came by ship. They suggested doing it here in na Paulista, porque a Paulista era espigão muito alto. Naquela época tinha muitos tuberculosos. E a tuberculose era curada somente com ar puro. Since it was very wooded here, the patient would heal because of the fresh air with oxygen.
Can you tell me a little bit about the story of St. Catherine's martyrdom?
She was a young woman from Egypt, from the city of Alexandria, but she wanted to be baptized and become a Christian. And at that time, the emperor, who controlled everything, including the church, no one could say they wanted to become a Christian. And she was very admired for being an intelligent and very beautiful young woman, which is why today she is also the patron saint of philosophers. The emperor ordered a wheel with very sharp knives to be made to put her on that wheel. And the idea was that when the wheel started turning, she would be completely torn apart.
And it was a torture that would lead to death.
A torture, yes. And the legend, the story goes like this. When they put that wheel in place, it broke. And that was a huge affront to the soldiers, especially to the emperor, that whole thing. And she kept insisting on wanting to be baptized, to become a Christian. And they said, no, you're not going to become a Christian, and so on, blah, blah. Anyway, when she realized that their opposition to her wish was very strong, that she really wanted to be baptized, she surrendered. She said a beautiful prayer to God and gave herself up. Do what you have to do. Then she was beheaded. They cut off her head.
From up here, I'm very close to the so-called harmonium, which is this organ that was made in 1890 and was brought here at the beginning of the chapel's construction. At the time, the sisters themselves played the organ. Today, there are volunteers who come here to take part in the masses. It's just one more of the many treasures that are inside this church. Because of its proximity to the hospital, and we know that the chapel was built together with the hospital, this chapel has a very important role, which is to welcome the sick and their relatives. First, they come here, especially when there is a very serious situation before surgeries, to pray. Afterwards, it's very common for families to come here often to give thanks. People who were healed, who in the hospital, come into the chapel even on their knees make their way all the way to the altar to give thanks for the healing. So, as Sister Ruth just told me a little while ago, if these walls could talk, they would tell stories of many lives that were saved right here next door. Now that we've seen the church, I came back outside so we can take a look at these frescoes, which are very beautiful. There are some colors that really catch our eyes. What's important here is that they tell the story of the martyrdom of St. Catherine, from her resistance to the attempted torture that appears in this fresco. Here, with the wheel that was built by Emperor Maximinus, and which, according to tradition, miraculously didn't work. Here it is drawn. The moment when it shatters is painted here. And unfortunately, the last fresco, this one here, shows the scene of St. Catherine's beheading, with angels that we can see there carrying her body. And then St. Catherine glorified in heaven with a feather in her hand, the symbol of her wisdom. She didn't become the patron saint of philosophers by chance. But here, without the sword, without the wheel, which will appear in other images, as we saw, for example, inside the church. St. Catherine is the patron saint of philosophers and students, but also of all those who work with wheels. That's right, mechanics, turners, this connection with human effort, represented by working with the wheel and also with knowledge. And all this makes her an emblematic figure for a hospital that started with only 40 beds, and today is a leading hospital in São Paulo. Here, right next to the Chapel of St. Catherine, there's another reminder of the time when there were no cars on Avenida Paulista, back when there weren't all these buildings that I'm seeing here beside me. There were mansions and palaces like this one here, a place that was made to be the residence of the coffee barons. This place here is the Casa das Rosas. It's a mansion. Inside it's beautiful. And on the outside it takes us back in time. You have to close your eyes, not see that it's full of buildings around here, that there's that antenna, that there are buses passing by, motorcycles, and just think about what I'm experiencing here, which is this house. That takes me back in time. Casa das Rosas is very charming, isn't it? It was built in 1935. The architectural style mixes neoclassical elements and touches of Art Deco, which is the same architectural type, for example, as Christ the Redeemer or the Empire State Building in New York. The gardens that gave the place its name are also an important attraction. The rose garden has so many varieties of roses that it is always in bloom. Sitting here to eat, having a coffee at this small restaurant inside the Casa das Rosas is like traveling back to the time when Paulista Avenue was just like we've been showing throughout this whole video, right? It used to be a place of mansions, a place with many gardens, a calm place, nothing like it is now. Very different, right, from how modern it is today. I ordered a ravioli here, remembering the visits we made to the Church of St. Aloysius, Gonzaga, to the Chapel of St. Catherine, so beautiful, right? The conversation with Sister Ruth. It was a really cool experience to see Paulista Avenue in a different way, looking for the religious places. So now I'm going to say goodbye here. See you in the next special report, and our journey continues.